When a child is born, we look at its size, its obvious incapabilities, and its lack of experience. And what we think is that it is our job to teach that child what's best for it. That it's our job to ensure the progression of that child, to mold it into what we think is best for it to become. In essence, we think that it's our job to lead them. We think this because we have forgotten the actual way that the universe is trying to achieve progression. We've lost track of the concept of what expansion means for ourselves and our children. Let me remind you today. So here's my demonstration. I want you to think of yourself. Okay, here's you, right? Just draw you as a little stick figure. Now, you are a part of what we call a soul family. Now, a family, any kind of family, is kind of like if Source itself was the ocean, okay? This is the ocean of Source. It's everythingness. It's all consciousness. A family within Source consciousness, even just like your family line, would be one stream of consciousness within that ocean of Source. It could be like a current within the ocean. Now, we all know that the East Australian current is a current within the ocean. When you ask if it's the ocean, yes, it is. But you can also say you can narrow it down to saying it's a current. So when we're talking about a family's consciousness, we're talking about one of these currents within the ocean. And you come down as a third-dimensional, physical extension of that consciousness of that particular stream, right? Now, what's happening as you're going about your life is you keep adding to desire. That's what your life does for you. So you experience something that you don't like very much, and that causes you to want something. Now, in your life, you have a lot of resistance to what you want. A lot of contradictory vibrations, right? But Source itself doesn't. And the expansion of Source consciousness and the expansion of your own family line here is happening as a result of what is desired within your consciousness. And it is happening instantly because there's no contradictory thought within that family consciousness. Now, you right now are the furthest most progression of the consciousness of the family line. Now, here's where it gets interesting, though. Let's say in your day-to-day life you experience things that are unwanted and it causes you to desire something. Those desires are actually added to the vibration of the consciousness, not just of Source, but of your family line. They basically become that. So let's say that let's say you're in the 1960s movement. This is my mother, right? You're in the 1960s movement, and what you want is empowerment for women. Okay, so here is one of those desires, empowerment for women. And the consciousness of your own soul family, which is part of Source, takes on that empowerment. But let's say in your day-to-day life, even though that desire is now calling you forward into the progressive space, you can't go in that direction easily because you've got a lot of thoughts from your 1950s upbringing that make it so that you can't fully line up with that. Maybe you go into a resistance state. So instead of embracing empowerment, you're just resisting disempowerment. Same thing, right? Either way, you can't line up with it in your waking life. What will happen is that your progeny, that means your son or daughter, is going to come down to this life already as the manifestation of that expanded consciousness, the expanded consciousness that you yourself could not line up with. So that's why for so many of the 60s kids who wanted so much freedom, a lot of them got indigo children and crystal children, who are basically the progressive form of humankind. They're basically everything the 60s was trying to be about. So then what happens is this is the way it was designed within Source consciousness. It was designed for your child to be the one that is calling you towards him or her. So it's the child actually leading the expansion, leading the progression, and leading the enlightenment path of the parent. Because the child is in fact the embodiment of the progression of the consciousness of the parent. Now, obviously, the child doesn't do this in comfortable ways sometimes. It does this by reflecting the things that you're suppressing in yourself. To understand more about the way that desires lead the expansion and progression within our universal consciousness, I suggest that you watch my video titled, Happiness is the Purpose of Your Life. Want to know why? As your parents lived their life, they gave rise to desires, some they knew about. For example, perhaps they always wanted to be an artist, but they were forced by their parents to do something more practical. Some desires, however, they forgot about. The process of socialization teaches us that some things are acceptable and some things are not. The things that are seen as not acceptable become suppressed, denied, disowned, rejected, and eventually become a part of the subconscious. Now, a basic soul desire within all of us is to become whole again. In a more straightforward way, down deep, the desire is to reintegrate with parts of us that we learned were unacceptable and to experience them being loved and wanted and being a part of us. For example, let's say that a woman is born into a family where anger is not okay at all. She'll suppress, deny, reject, and disown this aspect of herself. Now, chances are, because within her being it's a desire to become whole again, and part of her is angry, right? It hasn't gone anywhere. It's not like she could eradicate it from her being. It's part of her. So what happens? She rejected, denied, and disowned that aspect, and so the universe will be so kind and gentle as to mirror that to her by bringing her a child who exhibits anger. Now you might be asking, how the hell would that be beneficial to anybody to own anger again? What if all of her boundaries are contained within her angry self? Obviously, this person is a walking, breathing, living doormat. She can't assert any of her needs and wants, or say no. Obviously, her life is painful because of it. Now, this child will come in as the embodiment of her boundaries. This child will be able to say no. And how does she react to that? The same way that she reacted to boundaries within herself, by rejecting, denying, disowning, and basically disapproving of them. But when she does that towards the child will then exhibit the anger that is on top of those boundaries. The child's just reflecting her. She doesn't see it at all. She sees herself as the doormat to the child now. This is because she's basically refusing to go with the flow of expansion and realizing that those boundaries are in fact what she's rejecting within herself. Her child will in fact be born as the embodiments of her desires for herself. If she cannot line up with her desires in her life, they will come through her child. The child is being born as the expanded form of consciousness within the family line, is born as the single biggest thing that is calling the parent to their own expansion and awakening. If in the previous scenario a child comes in with an angry disposition, it is an offering for the woman to re-own her anger and re-own her boundaries. By doing this, it is obvious how her life would improve. And if she starts to re-own her own sense of boundaries and allow the child to have boundaries as well, because she doesn't reject boundaries in the child, guess what happens to the parent-child relationship? It improves. If we do not recognize and re-own these aspects of ourselves that our children are mirroring so as to call us into expansion, we will take an alternative approach, and that is to crush those things within them. Thus, the parent-child conflict begins. We inflict the same wound on our children that our parents inflicted on us. So let me explain on a vibrational level what's happening in this dynamic on planet Earth with parenting today. There is a vibrational difference between where the child is vibrating and where the parent is vibrating. The child is in fact vibrating at the expanded form of consciousness, and the parent doesn't recognize this. So instead of the parent coming to close that vibrational distance this way towards the child, the parent is trying to drag the child back to the vibrational set point where they now reside. By doing so, we are denying our own process of expansion and also the world's. The parent and child relationship was always meant to be a partnership in expansion and awakening. We cannot do this if we take an attitude of superiority towards our children and do not realize that they, being incarnated with the essence of our desires and thus expansion, are our biggest opportunity to expand and become fully conscious. Parenting can not be hierarchical for this to occur. The parenting process is something that must happen hand in hand. We must let them lead us into the expanded place. And our parenting of them must be designed in a way where by parenting them, we are in fact parenting ourselves into the expanded place that they are calling us to. For example, let's say that when you were young, your subconscious desire was for your parents to be fully present with you and really there with you when they were there with you, where all of their attention and focus is on you. Now, you didn't get this. You couldn't get that out of them. You couldn't call them forth into being able to be present, and so you crushed it. They crushed it in you first, but then you decided to crush it inside yourself on a subconscious level as well. So you became a doer. Now, a doer isn't really in a state of presence. They're just constantly in activity. Chances are you are going to have children who are perfectly good at being present. That's the expansion, right? They can be fully with you, totally engaged, and that's what they want from you. However, because you've already crushed that aspect of yourself, likelihood is you're going to be a doer who doesn't focus enough attention on them, who can't give them presence, and who doesn't understand why they're so upset at you that you can't. There will start to be friction in the relationship because they want this presence from you, and you will fight with them about how busy you are instead of realizing that this is your opportunity to become what you always wanted and to get what you actually always wanted from your parents. If you become conscious of this, you could practice parenting them with presence, being completely engaged with them when you're with them, and by doing this, you would not only line up with your own desire, but you would be enabling that expansion of your own consciousness and the consciousness of your family line that is embodied within them. Our conflicts with our children are always an opportunity to recognize an area where they are trying to call us into a space of our own expansion, which is a place where we can, in fact, best meet their needs and parent them and teach them how to carve out their own life here in society. And when we do that, the conflict with our children goes away. We have to begin with the premise that our children do not belong to us. They belong with us, but not to us. They come in with their own unique essence, which just so happens to be an expanded version of us. And with that essence embedded within them, it is our job, essentially, to enable them to find and express that essence. It is not our job to decide what that essence is. What we fail to do as parents is to tune into the unique essence of a child and what a child needs. Now, one of the best things that you can see within parenting relationships with children who literally can't alter their behavior to fit in with the needs of society, say autistic children, is that it literally forces a parent, because they can't alter the child to match their vibration, it forces the parent to tune into the needs and desires and special essence of their child so as to best parent them in a specific way. But we, as parents who don't have that type of child, need to do this without being forced. It needs to be a choice. We need to listen and see and feel them with all of ourselves so as to make the right decision for them specifically. We don't see how doing this is actually the best thing for us, but it is. You basically need to separate yourself from who your child is. If you don't do this, what you're doing is cutting off your own capacity to see their essence, and what's much more damaging, you are cutting them off from actually accessing their essence. They are already in touch with who they are and what they want. Our job is to help them actualize this. And the only way for us to do this is to realize that they are the embodiment of our own expansion. The only way to parent them so as to help them actualize their innate essence and desires and purpose is to line up with our own desires, both conscious and subconscious. To do this, we must consider that we hold beliefs, values, thoughts, assumptions, and motivations that we have never questioned or examined. We inherited them and pass them on, regardless of whether they are the chains that imprison us or the keys that set us free. I want to offer an idea that every interaction with your child is an opportunity to examine these beliefs, thoughts, assumptions, motivations, and values so as to become more conscious and give to our children keys instead of chains. One key tool to use here is to consider, how could this be a chain? Whenever you're doing something or imposing some value or belief or whatever on your child. Here's another way of putting this. Every interaction you have with your child is an opportunity to either enable or boost their essence or crush and diminish it. And in doing so, every interaction with your child is an opportunity to either stand with and on the side of your own expansion or to close yourself down to your own expansion. Let me give you a practical example of what I mean. Let's say that your child is so excited because he found a frog or a snake or something, and it's really dirty. So that kid runs in with mud everywhere and is so excited and in this open state to show you what he found. You're at a crossroads in that moment as a parent. You can choose according to your beliefs, according to your values, according to those types of things. But I hope you question them. Because if a child approaches you with that attitude of being so excited to share something with you, you can decide at that moment that it's more important to bolster their self-esteem and to say, wow, that's incredible, and also increase your connection with them by responding to that bid in a positive way. Or you can crush that child's openness in that moment and teach them that a clean floor is more important. You might see in that moment that keeping a house clean may be a lesson for another day, because if you get upset at them for getting the house muddy, you will shut down the excitement and openness and connection to you. The parenting process is nothing more than an accumulation of moments that are opportunities for us to be present and conscious like that. That is the only way we will parent them in the way that causes them to become self-actualized adults who are happy. When we take this approach to parenting, even discipline will take on a form that adds to a child instead of diminishes a child. So in this moment, I ask you to understand that the dynamic that is happening on a spiritual level is the reverse of what we actually think it is between parents and children. It is not the parent who is calling the child into the expanded place. It is the child who is expanding the parent into that expanded place, and it is the parent's job to enable that. I also ask you to take on this perspective that every interaction with your child is an opportunity to enhance their spirit and their unique essence, or to diminish it. And every time you get into conflict with your child, consider that they are merely calling you into your own expansion, and often by reflecting to you something that you disowned within yourself long ago and need to learn to re-own and accept as part of yourself and eventually love. I'm going to give you one tip here. To become conscious of these unconscious aspects within us, what we have to ask ourselves when we're in the minute of being upset about something our kid is doing or some interaction we're having with them, why am I getting so upset in this scenario? Your children will continue to mirror the aspects of you that you have not integrated, so as to integrate them and become more whole. Every moment we answer the call of our children to become more conscious, and especially become more conscious of what we are unconscious of, we are standing on the side of our own expansion. We will end the conflict between not only us and other people, but especially us and our children and us and ourselves. This is an awesome opportunity. Now, when we do this, the answer about how to best parent our child doesn't have to come from a book. It will come to us directly, as if the answer was always knocking on the damn door. We just never answered it. Have a good week.